You know, I don't know how many people know, but before Sean and I ended up at RX Green, we spent time at a number of cannabis operators, some multi-state operators, some single-state operators. So we've had a chance to really see markets expanding, markets lighting up, and be front lines on a lot of the good things and the bad things that have happened market to market. And I think one of the most important things to remember in any new market, whether it's Minnesota or otherwise, you must look at what's happened before you. And this idea that your market is the market that's going to buck the trend of the other 40 markets is not necessarily true. I think the second piece too is everyone gets so excited about what they think the demand's going to be. Do we hit the ground running and meet all the demand at once? And you end up flooding the market. And you know, I saw that when we were talking about legalizing on the adult use side down in Florida. Everybody wanted to amp up production, and thank goodness they didn't, because the measure didn't even pass. But it's actually okay to undersupply the market for a little bit. The supply and demand metrics, we all sit here and look at margin compression, and we wonder why every single market seems to go the same way. It's lightning in a bottle in the beginning, then all of a sudden it levels out, then adult use comes in, then prices go down, and the next thing you know, everyone's discounting, and you go from businesses opening up to businesses closing. So I think the first thing is realize that the rules of the market are going to apply to your market too. Maybe not exactly, but don't just assume that it's crazy. Now, in terms of what you build out, I mean, Sean, you've got more experience building out grows.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to walk before you run. You know, you're doing a few things simultaneously. You're getting to know your new facility, you know, how it behaves, training up a new team. I really think it comes down to the basics. And starting off with something that's just really the foundation for what's going to make a grow successful. Allocating your labor properly with a new team. You know, for example, on a new site, you know, I'd recommend ready-to-use bags. You can rip them, roll them down, they're ready to go. It's a pretty simple SOP, something you can teach new hires that are going to grow with time in the industry, especially in a new market where those people didn't really have an opportunity to grow and scale. Giving them simple nutrients to mix, simple dries, simple liquids, and you know, having a provider that's going to provide that support to back you up, that'll fly out to your site and, you know, not just email you SOPs, but also show you how to do it and be there for tech support and for troubleshooting when they need it. When there's a problem on the fly, it's great to have a sounding board, to have a, you know, a third party outside of the grow that can you know, help you with how it's worked for them in other situations.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's more like you don't need a vendor as much as you need a partner in those situations, because you want someone to understand what you're trying to build. I think if you go back and look at the early days and the facilities that were being built and how big those facilities were and the dollars that were spent before you actually put a single plant into one of those grow rooms, I think the concept of being able to build out on a modular basis, where you only light up a few rooms at a time, show that you've got the right demand, and when you're selling through that, then light up another room and another room. So maybe don't spend as much up front, keep some dry powder, but then also work with your vendors and make sure that they're aligned with you and they're not just transaction focused. You know, that was one of the first things that we put in place when we got here to RX Green is, you know, we didn't want to be another vendor. We used to be operators. We used to be on the other end of that phone when shops like us would call. And so many are transaction focused. It's how many did you buy this month and how many can I put you down for next month? You know, I think Sean and his team, they have no responsibility for sales. Their job is to understand our customers and our customers grow and to provide advice and knowledge and share whatever we can. Now, we'd love for you to use our products. Absolutely. We hope that's the end game. But we also recognize that you might not. You might use some, you might use all, you might use none. But we should not use that as the reason not to be a value-added partner, because I think long run, when you align yourself with providers like that, you're going to have an easier time running that facility. There's going to be less pressure from the salespeople. You're already getting enough pressure from the leadership team trying to get you to light things up and go fast. So, you know, I think pick your vendor smartly.
Absolutely. There's not a one-size-fits-all, you know, go-ahead approach with every single facility. You have to tailor it around that. And, you know, why spend money on your own trial and error when you can learn from somebody else's? You know, having been through the process in different states, you know, running outdoor, indoor, greenhouse, all sorts of different, you know, approaches to growing plants, you know, it's better to lean on the experience and draw from there and see what works for you and, you know, see what can help you out.
Yeah, I mean, for the single state operators, they're kind of developing everything on their own. I think, Sean, you raised a great point that thanks to the wonderful regulatory regime, you're probably bringing people in who either maybe grew in home or really might have had some agriculture experience, but they've never grown cannabis in a commercial setting like that. And that's sort of been the story in every state. Now, a multi-state operator has the advantage of maybe honing their SOPs and some of their other grows, but, you know, having seen enough of those operators, some of their grows are not built to line. a lot of these were built independent of one another. So when you look at even SOPs in some of the largest MSOs, they're still evolving. They haven't gotten to really that standardized format. Even their procurement hasn't even standardized. You know, like they're going to grow in loose cocoa versus compressed cocoa. It's really all over the map. So, you know, I think the multi-state operators have a leg up in that they have some experience. They know the strains they probably want to use. They have certain things dialed in. But then the regulatory framework could hold them back, right? And I think that's been the other problem. You know, if you could sell the same product in all the individual states, that would make life a lot easier. But sometimes you have limitations, you know, that could hold you back. What products can be approved? What it goes through to get your products approved? I think that's probably the other piece of advice. Understand your regulations backwards and forwards, because chances are the regulatory body that's there is figuring it out on their own as well. And I mean, we've been a part of some states where just getting products approved takes a long time, even if it's just a variation on an existing product. You know, another pre-roll or another vape cart or something like that. It goes on, and that's valuable time that you're not able to sell a product in the market. Another reason not to spend so much on your build out until you start generating some revenue. The goal here is you've got to get to revenue generation sooner rather than later, and then that starts to build that flow.
Absolutely, especially when it comes to state-by-state regulations. Staying compliant is the best safety net you can have. You know, with a really positive relationship between the grow staff and the compliance teams, that's really how you're going to get the most done as a team and be most effective. There's some products that are approved in one state, but not another. So being able to make those informed decisions to make sure you're compliant and not get caught up on something that you might not have realized. Some states have regulations on, you know, how many watts per square foot you could have. Yeah. And, you know, perhaps someone that designed the building wasn't really aware of that and how to work around those types of things.
Yeah, yeah. I think the last piece of advice is also know your market. You know, in the early days when you were an early market, like when Colorado first opened up, there was really nothing around it. So you had that first mover advantage, you had scarcity of product, you had no competition from the border states whatsoever. A lot of times as you see some of these new states come online, just like when you see new stores coming into a new town in an existing state, everyone gets excited because, oh, well, this group over here was doing X. Well, that's because they were standalone by themselves for a while. So if your border states are already doing some type of program, whether it's medical or medical and recreational, take that into account. Don't just assume that it's all going to be additive. There's going to be a little bit of poaching around the edges and the borders. Look for where you're locating your shop to make sure that you're in a good space, whether it's from an access to transportation, maybe you're on a route that it's a pretty long distance before your next competitor is there. You know, and there's a reason for people to come to your shop. So, I mean, there's nothing really revolutionary that we're saying here that wouldn't apply to just about any other business out there. I think it's just acknowledging that the rules do apply to this industry as well as others. The good news, I think, though, is what we've seen is the whole industry is starting to recognize that. For the longest time, I think it pushed back and said, no, these rules don't apply. Even if it was just rules in the garden, don't apply. And now all of a sudden you're starting to see people paying attention to all these things, paying attention to the dollars, the spend, what it costs to produce a product, what you can realistically sell it for, and educate the consumer, right, and all those things. So, you know, you had 40 states or so, or 39 states before you, so pay attention to what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one thing that's really, you know, beneficial towards having an efficient grow when it comes to cost are just knowing, you know, having as few movements as possible. Really making sure your tasks are efficient so you can divert or repurpose, I should say, that time into other aspects of the garden. Walking it, doing checks on your plants, making sure your levels are correct, and cross-training everyone. You know, everyone kind of knowing the different positions so they can all pitch in and help.
Yeah, don't reinvent the wheel either. You know, a lot of new businesses when they first start out, startups, they figure things out, which is kind of code for they're inefficient. You know, a lot of times they're not taking advantage of certain things that, you know, maybe it's because experience, maybe they've never been in this position, maybe it's just the pressure of trying to scale the operation. So, you know, keep the moving parts as limited as possible. You know, take the knowledge that you can from other areas. Recognize the fact that just because something's always been done a certain way doesn't mean it has to be done that way. So ask some questions along the way. But I really like the idea of the cross-training, so that means it keeps your staff lower, not lighting up all the rooms at the same time, keeps your overhead a little bit lower, being smart with the strains you launch, because it's probably going to take you, what, 2-3 harvests to really start to get those dialed in?
Yep,
that's basically, you know, half a year right there if you're going to do 5 or 6 turns. So, you know, try to pick a strain that's user-friendly. Don't swing for the fences. out of the gates. Unless you're super, super experienced and this is your third or fourth grow that you're lighting up, then by all means. But, I think don't make it harder on yourself than you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Once you kind of get those baseline efficiencies in place, you're operational, things are going well, the environment's behaving how you want to, your feedings are dialed in, you feel like you're in a pretty comfortable place, perhaps then looking at some strains that might be a little bit more difficult to grow, something to consider. Absolutely.
And that's a great point, though, because as well as you build the facility, what happens when you actually light it up can be vastly different. Even if you're a super experienced grower, how all those devices all work together in the same room. Whether it's your lights, your DUs, whether it's your HVAC, you're using a chiller, like what is it that you're doing? So you really do have to tune that up when you get it going. It's like breaking in a car, it's like breaking in anything. It takes a little bit to figure it all out. It's built with the best of intentions, but until you start putting things in there and doing what you meant to do when you built it, you just don't know.
Yeah, you don't. You could have 8 identical rooms that were built by the same people with all the same equipment. And they could behave differently. I've seen that.
Yep.
Some rooms might have more of a stretch. Some might frost up a little bit more. That could be because one room's on a corner. It could be because it's south facing or north facing. It could be because it's on an end. It could be because your sensor is placed, in between a wall versus on an exterior wall. And it's reading from 2 different points. So there's a lot of nuances to work out.
Yep, so measure twice, cut once. That's the age-old moniker.